Hey guys, hope you're doing well on this wonderful Friday. The market is still across the board pretty slow, guys. Sitting in a lot of areas and not really making move. So most of the things I'll be talking about going over the daily charts will be pretty similar to what I was already talking about yesterday. So what I'm going to do because of that, and also the fact that it's the end of the month, is take a look at the monthly charts today. Right now I have the USDCAD daily up just to kind of give you an example of how it's still sitting exactly where it was yesterday, basically right on top of these levels that we were talking about. So I'm going to go into the news for next week a little bit, and also cover our terms, of course. But then we're going to look at the monthly charts for a little bit and kind of take a step back and take a longer term look at the technical analysis just for today. Okay, guys. So because it's the first week, there's going to be probably a lot of news. Well, there's always going to be a lot of news, but I'm just going to scroll through here and kind of just show you what the first week of December looks like in terms of news. We have a cash rate announcement on Monday for the Australian dollar, overnight rate the next day for Canadian dollars, which is going to be big. Unemployment stuff Wednesday, unemployment stuff Thursday, and then non-farms on Friday. So that's just a very, very brief look at some of the major red tag stuff we got going on for the first week of December. So because of all the news, which is always going to be a lot of news, especially because it's the first week, I think it'll be great to take a monthly look and kind of look at what some of that news might lead to in terms of overall expectation. Alright, so let's quickly check out our terms, then get into the chart. And as you know, if you watch the daily analysis on any kind of regular basis, the terms just basically say that we're not licensed or qualified to provide investment advice, and that the daily analysis is just for your educational benefit and only a way for us to tell you what we think of the market and not a way for us to tell you how to risk your own money. Okay? Alright, guys, so first I have up the euro dollar monthly chart, and obviously you can see that we're in somewhat of a sideways market. I have this trend line drawn here. It only hits 2 points, so it's not like it's a long-term consistent trend line. But obviously you can see that since about early 2008, when this started crashing, we had a strong bounce later on in that year, and since then it's been pretty much sideways. I mean, headed in a slightly descending triangle type form, but relatively sideways since 2008. And so you can see that right now at this point where we're at, this bounce started basically in August and September of 2012 when it hit the bottom of this range. We're bouncing back up toward the top, and so again, this is not like a very solid trend line that's been tested multiple times. So if you're thinking long on the euro, it's not reasonable to assume that it's going to come back and test this line again, because again, that line does not have a lot of authority. That's not a major level that's really sucking price in. But what you can gather is that this is on the bounce, and it's likely that it will go higher than what it is now, because most of the bounces from the bottom here are gaining a decent amount of pips back to the upside, a lot more than what we've seen so far with this run. Now again, you could certainly see a bearish bar in between, but it looks like this is a nice little pin push bar where momentum shifted toward the bullish direction at the end of the month for the euro, and so I would personally expect some more euro strength as it continues to push up. It's right kind of in this middle zone here. You can see that this has been a key level where price has struggled, so it'll depend on if it closes above that, which obviously, depending on where you draw your line, it looks like it's closing just above that based on this monthly chart. So again, we'll see what happens next month if this continues up, but the overall assumption based on technical analysis here would be that the euro is going to continue to bounce at least up to a higher level. Maybe again not up to here, might not come all the way up and test the trend line, but maybe somewhere in this area at a minimum, which is around the 135. So strong monthly bounce, here. It's not a major bar like this one or this one that actually got rejected immediately, but consistent 4 bullish months in a row with a double bottom off this area down here. So a good strong move back up towards the 135 and possibly 140 area on the euro dollar. Okay, let's check out the pound. Okay, so the pound is kind of in a similar situation. The major difference is that the collapse was much more intense on the pound than the dollar, as you can see. This is that same 2008 time where it crashed pretty epically, and the crash was a lot more severe, and then also the sideways market, or this little wedge here, is a little smaller, a little tighter range. So the collapse was bigger, but the range was smaller. And so there's this trend line that's kind of moving up. It's kind of where the euro dollar was more of an ascending, or excuse me, a descending wedge, kind of headed slowly down. The pound is basically straight sideways. In other words, the incline from the bottom going up is pretty similar to the decline going from the top to the bottom on the other side. So it's a pretty sideways wedge, not like the wedge is moving up or down. And you can see that based on the bounce here, we're actually not too far from getting right back near the top of this wedge, assuming that you kind of respect this general flow of the top. So where the euro dollar looks like there's a lot more potential to go up, the pound dollar is looking like it's getting ready for an area to go down already again. So that's what to watch for on the pound. Okay, now the odd dollar is very, very different than the euro and the pound dollar, and the reason is we still have the same, pretty good crash during that 2008 area. But whereas the pound and the euro are now kind of moving sideways below at a lower price in the crash, the odd gained a lot of strength and actually way over eclipsed the high before the crash, which is very different than the euro and the pound that I just showed you, which shows a lot more long-term strength in the odd than the pound or the euro. Now, we're still in that kind of same type of wedge movement like most of the US dollar pairs are, but one thing you have to notice is that the strength behind the odd brought it up. So this is an upward pressure into an ascending wedge that way over peaked at this high of 2008, and so that adds a lot more likelihood for the the odd US dollar to actually break up out of this wedge, whereas the pound and the euro are more like coin flips in my opinion about which way it's going to break. So for me, that gives me some confidence in the odd strike to continue because it's an uptrend, an uptrend into a wedge, and typically what you'll see is a break to the upside. So I'm looking for odd longs, in very long-term perspective, because of what I see here. I mean, you got to realize the same U.S. dollar pair, or the same U.S. dollar currency, obviously, is the secondary currency for the euro, the pound, and the odd on the three pairs that we just looked at. Where the euro and the pound are way down here below the crash, the odd has basically come twice as high as the previous high, because of all that strength. So that shows some pretty incredible strength in the odd compared to the other currencies, which to me gives me some confidence and some hope in taking the odd long in a long-term type of situation. So that's the odd compared to the euro and the pound. It's pretty interesting to see the major difference there. Now, speaking of strength, this is one that's very interesting. This is the USD Canadian dollar, and obviously the USD is coming first compared to the pound dollar, euro dollar, and odd dollar. And so if it's going down, that means US dollar weakness, not US dollar strength, obviously. But I just want to clarify that. And what's interesting is that the USD has fallen against the Canadian basically straight down since 2002. I mean, this is about 2002 up here in this point. So it's fallen straight down. Now, during 2008, where the US dollar gained strength and we saw that the pound dollar, the euro dollar, and the odd dollar crashed, the US dollar CAD went up appropriately. But after that, we topped out, and now we're right back at where this low was at before that spike. So basically, the USD CAD was headed down long term. We got to a point, there happened to be an economic crash in the United States economy, which made the stock market go down. And when the stock market goes down, the US dollar currency strength goes up. And so the US dollar spiked, and then it reversed as soon as that crash kind of slowed down a little bit. And so now we're right back toward these lows, and the question is, this was kind of a not typical. This is not a typical move. It was happening because of an economic crash. Excuse me, I'm having a little trouble getting my words out. But it was happening because of an economic crash. The question is, if you remove this portion that I just circled, this is basically still a straight downtrend. We're just getting to a lower point. So does that mean that the US dollar is just going to keep crashing and making new lows and go onward with this massive crash against the ever gaining strength Canadian dollar versus the US dollar? And I personally think that's a pretty high probability. So that's what I'm looking at on the USD CAD. Okay, so far we looked at all dollar crosses, but here's a non-dollar. This is euro pound. And again, let's look at something interesting. During 2008, the same way where the euro and the pound crashed, I noted the pound crashed a lot heavier than the euro, which would note that the euro is stronger than the pound. And you can see that that certainly shows up right here by this massive move to the upside on the euro pound. But after that one move, right here when we hit our peak around 98, the euro pound has moved consistently downward for multiple years. Now, what's interesting to note is that I don't see a single place on this chart, this euro pound chart, since this moved down, since this bearish bar right here, I don't see a single place where there was 4 bullish bars in a row on the euro pound. Now, I might be blind and missing one, but I don't see one. And although these are not the biggest bars, to me it's still important to note that this is 4 bullish months in a row for the euro against the pound, which is the first time that's happened basically since this very big bullish run here. Now, am I, assuming that that means that the euro pound is going to rally now for 800 pips? No, but it is important to note that the euro has gained more consistency in terms of bullishness against the pound in these last 4 months than it has in the past 4 to 5 years. Of course, I couldn't go on about the bullish potential without noting that it is right near these this major resistance area on this monthly peak here and here. So that's something that we'll want to note. But still, I personally think that if we break through this level, the euro pound has basically limitless bullish potential. It could come up to these highs, it could come up to these highs, it could break these highs. I mean, you really never know. Again, these are not massive bullish bars that are taking the world by storm because of the euro strength, but just that consistency enough to do 4 bullish bars in a row is something we haven't seen in multiple years. So I think it's worth noting. And I think that it's worth noting that that is the last pair we're going to cover today, because that's basically the 4 or 5, I forget how many we covered, monthly charts that I wanted to take a look at today. And if you wanted to look at any more, we can certainly still do that Monday, even though it'll be the new month. We can go back. So leave a comment if there's any other monthly charts that you'd like to look at, and I will gladly do that. Alright, but thanks guys for stopping by for the analysis. Have a great weekend, and I will see you in December.